We would like to begin posing 3 questions and then answer those 3 questions. First, what do we know about the resurrection? Second, what don't we know about the resurrection? And third, what should we do with what we know about the resurrection?
Hello and welcome to the Trans Atheist channel. I am Trans Atheist, and today I have a rebuttal to another morning worship video. And today's topic is none other than, you guessed it, the resurrection. I love this topic as it's so easy to debunk, but Jehovah's Witnesses will insist that is an indisputable fact of life. But at the end of the day, like many of the claims in the Bible, it is a remarkable claim, with no evidence to back it up, and it is a remarkable claim at that. So I'm going to need remarkable evidence to believe it. And so should every person here who hears the claim of the resurrection. They should do this as well. So as he stated, we need to be listening out for 3 questions, the answers to 3 questions. What do we know about the resurrection? What don't we know about the resurrection? And what should we do about what we know about the resurrection? For any Jehovah's Witnesses that may be listening, I can answer these 3 right now. First, we know that probably the resurrection never happened. The only evidence we have for it is an empty tomb and second-hand eyewitness accounts that were recorded nearly a century after Jesus' supposed life. Knowledge that then went through a very long game of Chinese whispers. Then the second answer is that we don't know anything about the resurrection. As I already stated, we cannot trust the sources for these claims for multiple reasons. And the answer to the third question is we should fact check every claim in the Bible, including the resurrection, whether that be the resurrection of Jesus or of the supposed future resurrections after Armageddon. Fact check, and fact check. This is the only way to know that what you hear, or what you're told, or what you believe has any truth to it at all. So please, next time you hear a claim, go and fact check it. Anyhow, now I've had my little rant on this topic, let's get into watching what the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses have to say on the subject of the resurrection.
Well, first, let's go to that first question posed. What do we know about the resurrection that will soon take place here on earth? Well, first of all, we know it's a guarantee. It's a promise that will be fulfilled. And based on today's text at Acts 24 and verse 15, it says there is going to be a resurrection of both the righteous as well as the unrighteous. And just imagine what it will be like when that begins, when over 6,000 years of deaths are undone, and those who are sleeping in the graves will come back to life. What an amazing prospect. And as was pointed out, the first line in our Watchtower comments was pretty awesome, and I'm sure you saw that too, that Jehovah wants people to live, not die. So this is really a manifestation of Jehovah's power as well as his unfailing love for all mankind. And Jesus reflected his Father's love. In fact, he died in our behalf. And he wanted to fulfill the promise he made at John chapter 5, verses 28 and 29, where he said, all those in the memorial tombs will hear his voice and come out. All, meaning all the righteous and the unrighteous. Those who are asleep will awaken. They may have been long forgotten by humans, but Jehovah has never forgotten them. They are right in his memory. Now, have you ever gone to an old cemetery and looked at some of the gravestones? Some of the engraving has been worn off over years of weathering. We don't even know who's buried in that burial plot, but Jehovah does, and he has it filed away in his everlasting memory. So when we're talking about the righteous that will come back, who are we talking about? Well, the righteous are the faithful men and women that have died before Jesus' sacrificial death, and the other sheep who die during the last days. And what about the unrighteous? Well, the unrighteous are humans, billions of humans, who died without really having an opportunity to know Jehovah, to get to worship him, or even apply Bible truths. They will have the opportunity to get to know Jehovah, to draw close to him, and to do his will. The March 2016 meeting workbook, you may recall this, had this scenario. It said, instead of funerals, there may be welcoming sessions for the resurrected. Wow, that's going to be so amazing for us to actually be there and experience these welcoming type of meetings.
So, quite a lot to dive into in this short section here. He's made a lot of claims, based purely on the writings of a 2,000-year-old religious text, claiming that because one source says so, i.e. the Bible, then it's a guarantee somehow. As I already mentioned, fact check, because if you do, you will quickly learn that there is no corroborating evidence to the Bible's claims. But the first thing that I found odd about this speech was when he mentions dead people from over 6,000 years will be resurrected. Now, I'm not an expert anymore on Jehovah's Witness doctrine. They've changed a lot since I was a kid. But I didn't think that they taught human age to be exactly 6,000 years old, as it is in the Bible. I thought that they taught it to be in the region of 44,000 years old. Of course, I may be wrong on that. I may be getting my facts wrong myself. And I cannot remember the book that I remember that from, but I did find that a little bit strange. Then he goes on to once again, as Jehovah's Witnesses and many Christians do, say that God is love. I love debating this point because their own Bible refutes them on this point. I'm sorry, but a God who commits genocide, allows for slavery and incest and torture and rape, well, in my mind, that's not a loving God. And yes, I know that there is mention in the New Testament of him making changes on these points through Jesus' preaching love for all men. But I don't regard that as a good proof of his love. Firstly, let's use an analogy. If someone put a gun to my head and forced me to do something against my will, then beat me and tortured me simply because I didn't do what they asked in the correct fashion, and then proceeded a few years later to reapproach me and buy me dinner and flowers and offer me a cruise on a luxury yacht, I couldn't say that they excelled in love, that they were love itself. The horrible acts that they had previously committed would still be heavily on my mind. I could say, however, that they are a changed person and are good now. And that might work for the person in my analogy. But that does not work for an omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent being. If God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving, then there would be absolutely no excuse for the things that he does in the Bible. And he would prove himself to be weak-willed in his own inspired word, and disprove his own existence in the process. Then this leads on to another point that the speaker makes in this And this is about how all the righteous and unrighteous will come back from the dead, as God loves us all, and remembers each of us that has died. Now, I have mentioned some of my big issues with this teaching in a previous video on the New World delusion of Jehovah's Witnesses. And if you've not seen it, then please click on the link. It's some of my best work I've done, I think. But the point I want to touch on now is, what about all those that were killed as a result of Jehovah himself wiping out entire civilizations of people? For instance, the Bible story of the global flood. Millions of people massacred except for one family. What, do they get to come back? Somehow God remembered what he did? Somehow he felt remorse for what he had done? I mean, the speaker here mentions that all those that had not received a witness from Jehovah's people will get a second chance. If Noah's flood did happen the way that it says in the Bible, then not all those that died in the story would have had that witness. Not unless the only man on earth that worshipped Jehovah at that time, i.e. Noah, had his own television news preaching service. I suppose he had his own JW broadcasting show, live from the world headquarters of Jehovah's Ark. I mean, it's ludicrous, some of the babble that cults like Jehovah's Witnesses expect us to swallow. Like, for instance, welcoming parties instead of funerals. Am I the only one that chuckled at that idea? And the face that he pulled when he was saying that? Anyway, we better move on. Let's see what he has to say next.
And it posed two questions in that meeting workbook. Which of your friends and relatives do you especially look forward to seeing again? Now, there's probably some people going through your mind right now, like I am thinking about. The second question, which Bible characters do you especially want to meet and talk to? Again, a whole list is probably coming to our minds. Well, stay tuned. Well, here's a question. What indication do we have as to the manner in which the resurrected ones will take place? How will they come back? Well, based on 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 23, we know that the heavenly resurrection of the anointed is done in an orderly way. As Paul said, each one in his own proper order. Christ, the first fruits, afterward, those who belong to the Christ during his presence. So it will be progressive during that time. Now, since we know Jehovah is a God of order, it's reasonable to conclude that the earthly resurrection will take place in a logical and orderly way. Instead of having billions come back to life all at once, we know that it would make much more sense that it would be done progressively, so that as each one is resurrected, they come to life, we can help them individually to their needs and their circumstances. Well, what do we know about the physical and spiritual care resurrected ones will receive at that time? Well, at the right time, at Jehovah's perfect timing, he will awaken them. And what will they find? They will find abundant housing, clothing, and food, all given to them by whom? By those who will make it through this system and on into the next. Great tribulation survivors, you and me. And we have a precedent to that. Remember when Jesus resurrected a little girl and all those who saw that amazing miracle? What did he say to those who saw that? He said, please give the little girl something to eat. So he didn't say that at every time he resurrected someone, but he knew her individual needs and he addressed those. And likewise, we will have that privilege in this coming system. Most of us will have that privilege. And think about all the training that we have received here at Bethel and LDC and other areas of our organization that will be put to use at that time. And think about the billions of the unrighteous ones that will be resurrected that need to have spiritual instruction. They need to learn about Jehovah. They need to learn about Jesus and the ransom sacrifice and how they can exercise that faith in the ransom. Who will teach them? You will teach them, and hopefully I will teach them. And what will we use as a basis to teach these ones who need to learn about Jehovah and Jesus and Jehovah's requirements? Well, of course, the Bible will be something that we will use, but
Well, I'm not going to waffle on too much on this part, hopefully, but there is a couple of points that I would like to make. First, I can understand how missing those that we love, who have died, is a very difficult thing for us humans to come to terms with. And I really do feel for those who are struggling with the loss of loved ones. I think all of us have been there, and if it were possible for them to come back to life, I don't think any of us would pass up the opportunity to see our loved ones again. But let's think logically. This is an emotional, wishful thinking that Jehovah's Witnesses prey on to keep people following their teachings. It's one thing to miss a loved one who has died, but it's quite another thing to let that pain rule your life, and in so doing throw away fact, truth, and evidences, all because of an emotional longing. Of course, it's not just Jehovah's Witnesses that do this. All religions have this deep-seated emotional tie for its followers. It's this tactic that is most effective in converting and keeping people following the doctrine that's laid out by these religions. It's why religions are so powerful, and how they have been so powerful throughout human history. It's actually quite interesting when you research the scientific studies done on the mapping of the neural networks of the brain that are active for those who are religious thinking about God. It turns out that the most active regions are the emotional networks within the brain, the areas of the brain connected with the theory of mind, and the primitive emotional reactions that we all have. These are usually also areas of the brain we have little control over. So this explains why religions can be such a powerful ideology. Then the second point I want to draw in on is how the speaker here keeps using the word know or have knowledge of. Now, I find it fascinating the way he is, and Jehovah's Witnesses keep throwing around this concept of knowledge. Now, I would argue from a philosophical point of view that the term to know something is very specific, and that definition would be that to know something you must first believe it, then you must also have justification equal to the belief that the information you believe is true. Only then can you effectively know something to be true. This is why I keep going back to the same point, that before you are to know a claim to be true, you must fact check the claim and have sufficient evidence to prove it to be true. Anyway, let's move on to the final clip.
John's vision at Revelation 20 and verse 12 gives us another clue. Let's turn there and read this together. Revelation 20 and verse 12. It says, "And I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne, and scrolls were opened. But another scroll was open. It is the scroll of life. The dead were judged out of those things written in the scrolls according to their deeds." Now, was this mentioning the deeds of their past conduct or past deeds? No. This judgment will not focus on what they did before they died. But how do we know that? Romans 6 and verse 7. As you recall, it says, "For the one who has died has been acquitted," or the footnote says, released or pardoned from his sin. So those who come back to life, those who are resurrected, will have a clean slate. What a relief for them and for us, because many of us do know many who did not worship Jehovah before they passed away. So that clean slate is such a relief. So to live forever, there will be further requirements for those who survive the Great Tribulation, as well as those who are resurrected. We need to learn and continue to obey those requirements and any new ones that might be revealed by Jehovah during the 1,000 years. Well, what don't we know about the resurrection? A lot. There's so many questions that we might have. Will those who died recently be raised near the start of Christ's 1,000-year reign? Will the righteous be brought back first and then the unrighteous? Will they be welcomed by loved ones who know them? Will resurrections take place in the area where people died? How will Jehovah arrange matters for those who were married when they died? Will faithful men of old with leadership abilities come back to help to organize matters? Well, how will theocratic spiritual food be given? Will there be a teaching committee, a writing committee, or will another arrangement be made to provide spiritual food? Will there be hard copies? Will there be electronic copies? Will there be videos? Will there be some sort of a JW broadcast? We just don't know. We need to stay tuned, and we need to be patient. It's good to heed Jeremiah's advice. If you turn to Lamentations chapter 3, notice there in Lamentations chapter 3, verses 25 and 26, something that we want to focus in today, in the meantime. It says, "Good is Jehovah to the one hoping in him, to the person who keeps seeking him. Good it is to wait in silence," or the footnote says, to wait patiently, "for the salvation of Jehovah." So we know that in due course, all will be revealed by Jehovah. And as we rest our hope on Jehovah, and those in the future when they come back, they know that the one who will satisfy the desire of every living thing will have all taken care of for us. All the answers will be given to us. Jehovah has always given us what we need to be faithful now, and he'll do the same in the future. And now it's up to each and every one of us to prove our faithfulness, to put our hope in that resurrection hope and share it with others. And hopefully someday, maybe 1,000 years from now, we'll look back and we'll say, there was a resurrection of both the righteous and the unrighteous.
Well, before we can answer any of those questions that he's raised in this clip, don't we first need to answer a few preliminary questions like, did the resurrection of Jesus really happen? Is a resurrection even possible? What sort of evidence could we expect to see if it was possible? And finally, what level of evidence would be acceptable to equal the extraordinary claim of a global resurrection? We would need to answer those questions first. See, the questions that the brother here is asking in the talk, they're all based on an assumption. And without that assumption being proven true, all questions that follow on from it are quite frankly a massive waste of time. And he's not even attempted to answer any of these preliminary questions. But the really disturbing thing about this part of the talk is similar to a point that I've made in the New World Delusion video that I made. And that is the resurrection of the unrighteous that he speaks of. I've listened to many of their interpretations of these passages in the Bible, and it strikes me that if all crimes are wiped away and previous deeds do not matter, then in theory some of the world's most evil and hideously bad people may accept Jehovah and then get to live, possibly living in the same world, maybe even living next door to the people that they had committed unspeakable evils against. Although it wouldn't be a surprise to me in the slightest if Jehovah's Witness leaders would not see this as a problem. After all, like in my last video, Utah Hell, the elders made a 15-year-old rape victim sit and listen to a recording of the rape, and they saw no problem with that. So anyway, that brings us to the end of this video. I know it was a short one, but these were my thoughts on the morning worship video. Hope you enjoyed listening. I would like to shout out to my patrons and subscribers. Thank you once again. And if you haven't already, please like, share and subscribe. And please check out my Patreon. If you can help with a cup of coffee and a slice of cake each month, that would make all the difference. So I love you and I'll leave you now. And until next time. And please remember, ignorance is never bliss.